Okay, great. I'd like to call this meeting of the South County Senior Center to order. It looks like all members are here. I've never had a problem with anyone in this room with the code of conduct, so I'm not going to read any more of that. We have two discussion items. We're going to take our our get as much information as we can now from the EDM studio folks first, and then we'll have public comment after that. So, who do I turn it over to, Chris or Cindy?
It's
Cindy's
me.
new to me. Hi, Cindy.
Yeah, Cindy's with our team. I just wanted to introduce her to the group. She's helping us with the this little exercise that we're going through here. But good to see you again, Joyce, Dan,
Yeah, it's nice to see you too.
everybody else. I had saw Chris and Trevor recently and Jen, so hello again. Um, but so I toured the 112 Amherst Road site a couple weeks ago. um, Talked with the group, tried to get an understanding of what is it that the board is looking for this exercise. Obviously, we're turning this concept around fairly quickly here, so this was meant to really just be an update in terms of what information could we pull together to give you guys some progress report, give you guys an inclination as to is this site even feasible or not, and what does that actually mean?
Yeah,
Feasibility, what does that actually mean? So the the long and the short of it is I'm going to be presenting two options to the group for discussion for 112 Amherst Road. Um, and I did get some direction from Chris, and we also tried to squeeze in looking at the 8 Conway Road site as well. So I don't know if today would be a good time to bring that up as well, but I have some preliminary big picture thoughts on that site. Um, but I'll start with the Amherst Road, and then we can determine how far we want to go with the other site. So like I'd said, with the 112 Amherst Road, we looked at two different options. Um, the big difference between the options is going to be the discussion of the elevator. And I'm going to pull up the options here in a second, but just to kind of preface everything, the elevator is obviously a hot topic for
hmm
this building. It's 3-story building. The elevator currently functions fine. It's just not an ADA accessible elevator. And the code's pretty clear. We need to provide accessible route wherever we have members of the public or a primary function area. So if we provide any public activities on the second floor or anything that could be construed as a public activity, even if it's a conference room for the staff that the public could potentially go visit, it's going to be difficult to get a variance to not require an elevator upgrade or a new elevator at some portion of the building. So what we've done is we put together an option. An option one is going to look at, all right, if we decided to say, all right, we're going to upgrade the elevator and we're going to provide as much functionality within these 4 walls as possible, or 6 walls, because the building's at kind of a weird shape, but you get the point. As much program as we can fit within these exterior walls, what does that look like? What would that be? And what is the order of magnitude for something like that? The second option is going to be, what if we limit the functions, the activity spaces to the first floor, limit the second floor and the basement to staff only, which we have to be very diligent about what that means, and say that option would be the option that we would try to go for a variance to not have to upgrade the elevator. We feel like it would be a pretty decent chance to get a variance, but of course, with the state, it's hard to say one way or the other if you could get a variance for something like that, especially for a senior center. But the point being is that second option would be, in our minds, your best chance at not having to put an elevator in or upgrade the elevator to be an accessible elevator. So with
Can I ask you a
all of
quick
that,
question?
is there any
Uh,
questions before I jump into the plans?
yeah. The basement or the bottom floor, whichever we want to call it. Um, I think that one is accessible. There's a door in the back, and you can come in there. So I
Correct. It's the
think both floors are
second.
accessible in that sense, but I know they don't, you have to go outside to get from the second floor down to the basement floor or so I don't know what that, if that helps.
It helps a little bit in terms of what we could potentially put down into the basement, but it's limited, right? You're not going to want to send people outside to go to use a program space. But we'll show some options that we
Okay.
wanted to at least discuss, and so that's definitely part of the discussion. But the second floor is the big one, right? The second floor really, if we're going to try to go for a variance and not upgrade the elevator, that's the floor that's going to be the one that we more or less have to say that's a no-fly zone. Um, any other big picture questions?
I have a question. I thought that the 8 Conway Street wasn't going to be talked about today because you hadn't done anything about that yet.
Well, we've approved it at the select board level and moved on, but and at the WHO level, but we don't have to talk about it today. We can talk about it any other time. I guess my question was, I think you may hit on this in your presentation, but I think one of the other big questions was sprinkler.
Yes.
Okay, that's
So
all.
sprinkler. So yes, yep, that's another. So let me go through a few more things before I jump into the plan here. And that's a good point, Trevor. Thank you. So there are a couple of other big items that are going to be jumping out to us when we talk cost, right? Not just how do we fit the space out, but things that are going to be triggered by the code. So sprinklers is one. So sprinklers, there's really no out in the code at this point when we're changing the use of the building to this type of use to not require a sprinkler system. The building is not currently sprinklered. There's no fire service that comes from the street to the building. We did confirm that the street, obviously, it's a main road, has plenty of water pressure to provide a sprinkler system for the building. So it's available at the very least. It's not like we need a fire pump or, needing to do anything above and beyond tapped from the street, but a sprinkler system is going to be required if we put a senior center in this building. Bathrooms is another one. Based on the use of the building and based on how many more people we're going to be putting in the building as compared to what a simple office building would have been with, maybe 10 people on each floor, or, it's a much less demand in terms of restrooms required from the code, as opposed to putting large activity spaces where we're putting 20, 30 people in rooms. It just requires a lot more toilets. So toilets, regardless of how many floors we renovate, we're going to most likely need to provide more restrooms in the building. The commercial kitchen obviously is going to be a big topic. That is not a small number to have to put a commercial kitchen into a building that was not necessarily designed originally. I know we have, break rooms and there's sinks and there's refrigerators, but once we get into the commercial world, the demand for domestic water, the warewashing capabilities, exhaust requirements, sanitary requirements, grease interceptors, grease traps in both inside and out of the building. It just starts to add up when you want to put a full commercial facility in a existing space that wasn't necessarily meant for it. So that's going to be another big chunk of costs when we're talking about trying to fit the program into the building. And then there's just the general renovations, like how far do we want to go, moving walls around. We all saw the building on the first floor. If we're trying to squeeze as many activity spaces as we can on the first floor, there's going to be some moving of walls and whatnot. Luckily for us, it's a steel structure. All we're talking about is moving, metal stud and drywall partitions around. Of all of the things that we're talking about, moving some walls around and messing with some finishes is probably going to be the least of our worries. So, when we look at the plan here, I used the starting point of moving walls around and trying to fit things as best as we can. And starting from there, if we need to work backwards and say, hey, we got to save these walls, we can certainly explore that. But we started from how can we best utilize the building to meet the program as best as we possibly can. So that was the tack that we took. I think I covered all of the big items. Electrical MEP stuff is also usually a big cost, but electrical seems to be in perfectly good condition here. Mechanical, yes, there'd have to be some moving of some mechanical equipment, but it's not significant. It would be, more or less wrapped into the general renovation costs. The roof was brand new, so the roof didn't need to be messed with. The envelope is in pretty good shape. Windows are in pretty good shape. The exterior, there's been some discussion about the exterior, potentially repaving of things. From my first glance, it didn't seem like that was a requirement. Obviously, it could be a desired thing to do, but we can certainly discuss that more. But the exterior, more or less, if it was, it's not required to really do too much, with the exception of maybe some lighting here or there. So I'm gonna jump into the plan, and we'll walk around. And again, this is just my best. This is our first pass at fitting as much as we can in here. Obviously, we can talk about, does this room make sense here? This room makes sense here. But the point of this discussion is to say, is this really even a viable option or not? So I'm going to try to not get into the weeds of things too much, but happy to answer any questions if it comes down to it. So Jen, could you share? Let me
You should be
share.
allowed to share.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, let's see, screen 3. So just let me know if you can see
Yep.
plans here.
Yep.
So this option, like I said, is an option to show if we were to touch every single corner of the building and fit as much programmatic space as possible in here. This was our first stab at potentially achieving that. So in the basement, the idea would be we would have some sort of kitchen mechanical storage capability that would fit out most of the basement. We could potentially put the food pantry in here. But the big limiting factor down here that we were finding as we were starting to try to fit programmatic spaces in here is, again, just needing to put in more restrooms as soon as we start to put activity spaces in here. The basement only has one restroom. We feel like we could get away with that for, if it was mostly back of house staff spaces. But if we were to put, a conference room down here that could fit 20 people or 15 people, all of a sudden the bathrooms start to become a little bit too limited. So just this option, trying to keep it down as trying to find that fine line. But the basement, we were more or less trying to find, the use for staff and for back of house uses mainly, with the exception of the food pantry. You'll notice here that we are gesturing at potentially putting an elevator addition on the building. Our opinion is that if we need to go down the road of upgrading the elevator, it would be much more cost effective to put a small addition on for an elevator as opposed to tearing out the existing elevator and trying to expand the existing footprint. We've done that in the past, and it is not a cheap endeavor. We've done it for other reasons, whereas in this case it seems like there is a pretty good spot for an elevator to fit, and the site doesn't really restrict us. So in this case, we would recommend putting something off the side of the building. And as you'll notice, when we go up through the building, it does seem to land in a pretty decent place for utility usage. So the idea here, like I said, is the basement's mostly staff. You go up to the first floor.
Before you move on.
Sure.
How come so with the mechanical rooms down below, when we had gone through before, was it not feasible to have the kitchen on the exterior section like we talked about in a smaller scale for that with the mechanical room? I guess I'm not quite sure what those are for, because they have the other end where you have part of the storage room now for the watering closet down on the right there on my screen. So I'm curious as to why that got moved that way.
I think in the end, we can certainly, push and pull the kitchen around, whether it's on the exterior, whether it's on the interior. We haven't gotten into that level of detail with where it lands. I think just the point that it's in the basement is kind of the main talking point that I want to kick around. Like I said, we can certainly find a different home for it if it makes a lot of sense when we start to get into the nitty gritty. But the point of it being in the basement, I think, is the point that I more or less want to focus on.
Yeah, and it really requires over 1,000 square feet of mechanical space, because when I was there, some of the things that are labeled mechanical space were just like meeting rooms, and there's no mechanical stuff there. So
Yeah, down.
what I'm hearing you say then is that maybe this isn't the exact layout,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
somehow there's going to be like 1,100, more than that, almost like 1,200 something square feet of mechanical space, like a
And
third.
that could be mechanical, utility, could be storage. It's just kind of back of house space. The point that I was trying to make earlier was once we start to put more bodies down here, we require more bathrooms, which just increases the amount of work. So we were trying to keep it down as much as possible to pretty much a kitchen, maybe the food pantry, and everything else is mechanical storage space.
I think definitely the
That was
food
kind of
pantry.
the concept. What's
Okay.
that?
Yeah.
I think just definitely the food pantry. That's the obvious place for it. When you say maybe the
Yes.
food pantry, I mean, you can walk in privately there and no one has to see you go
Yep,
into the food pantry, you know?
exactly. Yep, that makes a lot of sense there.
Okay,
So going upstairs, the idea here is the entry to the west would be considered the main entry. As you can kind of see here from the plan, we're assuming that the first floor is going to be made wide open. We were trying to save as much as we possibly could. So the restrooms and the janitor's closet over here would remain. But everything else that you're looking at here, this was our best our best guess as to the best way to use the first floor. So we were looking at a fairly open lobby where you could access restrooms as soon as you walk in. There could be a small waiting area. You could have the elevator open directly into the lobby as well. There'd be a small staff area with reception that you could access from the main lobby here. So the main lobby, you get to restrooms. You get directly upstairs as well. The stairs could remain open. You wouldn't have to close that stair off. We could fit 4 offices in here fairly comfortably, small little copy area. Like I said, some additional bathrooms would be needed. We could potentially fit a decent sized multi-purpose room in here, about 1,500 square feet. The program called for, I believe it was 2,400 square feet. So we're only at about 60-70% of what the program called for. But the idea here is kitchen in the basement, administration on the first floor to be able to, control that first entry point for folks coming in the building. Large multipurpose rooms connected to the kitchen as close as we possibly can, with most of the other activity spaces fit on the second floor. So the second floor, you'd have the elevator poking out here into a corridor, double loaded corridor here connects the staircases, and we can fit 3 decent size activity spaces. We can chop them up however we want, with a 4th meeting space, but we have identified exercise, art/classroom, potentially a game room as well, and a fitness room. But like I said, we could kind of chop these spaces up however we want. But the idea was that maybe we put all the other activity spaces upstairs, the main event spaces downstairs, to try to stay as closely connected to the administration area as possible and the kitchen as possible. And just wanted to see how that would lay out. So upstairs also, as you can see, we have 3 single-use restrooms. 2 of them are existing in there, more or less in the same location. We have to add 1 just to accommodate all the different bodies that would be up here. So again, just looking at an option of how could we fit as many activity spaces as we possibly can. In this iteration, we looked at what would that look like if we put a lot of them upstairs. Not to say that's the right thing to do, just looking at different options. We put a chart in here as well that shows, and we can go through all these one by one if you guys want, but just from a comparison standpoint, we wanted to look at what was the program, what did that call for, and what is the available space that we're identifying in this option, and just say, hey, we called for 24,000 square feet for the multipurpose room. Availability is about 1,500 square feet. That gives us about a 64% availability of square footage for that space. For instance, the game room, I mentioned one of the rooms could double as a game room, but we identified a separate game billiards room at about 600 square feet. According to the current layout, there's no room for it. So just this chart is mainly to help everybody understand how this layout compares to what the program was calling for originally.
Right.
So you're saying that, can you go back to that little chart? You're saying there's only 6,525 square feet out of a 12,000 square foot building available.
I'm saying that of all the activity spaces that we listed here in the program, that we added up to about 6,500 square feet. Yes.
Well, where did the other 5,475 square feet go?
Well, there's corridors, there's stairs, there's the elevator, there's all this storage and mechanical space that's not really called out. So I mean, it adds up in the end, but basically all of these purple, orange areas, the bathrooms aren't called out here in this area as well. So that's just how the numbers added up when you're trying to squeeze in all the different pieces and parts. If we were to utilize the basement for program spaces, obviously that changes the math. We get a lot more, floor space back, but that's just what the math is and based on this, conceptual layout.
Yeah.
I think I mean, when we were looking at the other two, when you did the feasibility study before, we didn't have this much mechanical room space in either of those. And that added a whole new kitchen.
Yeah.
And then you're cutting out, like, can you go back to the top floor for me for a second, please? Cause we don't have copies of this yet.
Yep.
Between the art classroom was not that big. We had a larger movement room, and we don't need that big of a conference room. If we've got a big lobby downstairs, we can go to the main floor where our staff offices would be. We don't have a nurse's office, which could be the fourth office there, which would be moved to closer to a bathroom.
Yep.
And you could put a conference room somewhere in there.
Yep.
I mean, the other studies that you did were, and I know this is only a short turnaround time, given the fact that we didn't get the contract, there was a delay. It's just, I feel like we could definitely do a much better use of redoing this versus what we have compared to before, when we did the other two spaces for Whately and for Deerfield.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly push and pull some spaces around on the first and second floor. I would just, the basement is the basement. I don't know, unless we're going to start putting large activity spaces
No,
up.
we weren't planning on it. We were planning on using the multi-purpose room when we spoke to did the walkthrough the other week. We were going to use the multi-purpose room, whether it was on the top floor or the first floor there, to move the food stuff up to, to help with that. And
Like one of the purposes of the multi-purpose room could be the exercise. For
Sure.
example, you don't need a separate exercise room. Although the fitness,
Or-
which would have stationary machines,
Yeah.
might be something that does need a space.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, the point of this little diagram here was to really show that,
yeah,
there's a lot of sacrifices that are going to have to be made, and we can certainly debate, do we have exercise? Do we have fitness? Is everything in two large multi-purpose rooms? Like we could probably, we could chop it up a lot of different ways, but there are definitely a lot of deficiencies in, we
doubled
don't
storage.
personal services. I'm
We
sorry.
doubled table and chair storage almost from 250 to 423, so you could reduce that by half.
So I think again, because this is really rough and just kind of looking at it fast first meeting, maybe when Jennifer gets that in an email, she could kind of sketch out
Sure.
just kind of, I'd rather this here, rather that there, and just thinking like, okay, if we do anything in the basement, it's a lot of square footage in the building that we're not using because of what it is, and you can't really do, I mean, maybe we decide to put another bathroom down there and then we have some more flexibility for program space, but at least, this gives us an idea. Jennifer could kind of cut out what she thinks she would like to see.
Yeah.
And we could circle back after for because we could certainly move all those pieces around. Like you said, Jennifer, we definitely want a nurse's, office next to a bathroom kind of thing. And kind of sketch out like you did before, what you think should go where, and then just feed that information back to Chris.
Yeah.
Well, I think, okay, I'm just.
Can I just,
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I think that the big picture today is to try to get a magnitude of this project to see if we can move it forward. So I really think we should not be talking about whether the bathroom's on the left or the right. We've got to move on and get a
Right.
sense of what this is going to cost to see if it can even fly.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I do think though, I am a little dismayed that what's nominally a 12,000 square foot building, it really has only half of that as usable space. I I question that is all. And so, but given this is a sort of a I don't know, 10,000 foot high view, that
Yep.
question can be dealt with another time.
Sure.
Yep. Any other questions on this
So
one?
what did you come up with for cost analysis regarding the two big projects pacing, if you added the elevator on the exterior versus getting a waiver and then the sprinkler system?
So this type of option, again, as part of this study, the whole point was to actually put together a much more descriptive cost estimate. We have not had any time to be able to pull that together. We haven't even had time to review this with you. So as we can
Oh,
tell, there's
okay,
obviously
okay.
some discrepancies, but I think for this discussion, as Lauren said, big picture, you know, very, very rough numbers. And again, please do not, hold me to anything that I say here, even though I'm going to say it anyways. This, based on all the pieces and parts, this seems to me to be like a $6 million project, $6 to $8 million project. We're going to price it out if you guys want to continue further with this option, but that's rough order of magnitude of what we're thinking.
And that 6 million is because of having to build an elevator, having to put in sprinklers, having to put in extra bathrooms and toilets and a commercial kitchen. Those are accounted for in that rough number.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Those are the big drivers.
Those are
There's a
the big ones. And then
there's a
there's
lot.
the walls and things like that. Okay.
Yeah. There's more nuance to that. Yes,
Right.
those are kind of big things. It's not just, hey, move in and put an elevator in or something. It's there's definitely a lot of pieces and parts, and they definitely all add up.
And
Yeah.
that was generally, as you said earlier, you were gonna figure this on the high end because who knows, right? There's a lot of contingencies and stuff in this. So maybe when it went out to bid, we'd see a much more favorable number, but it's good to have a ballpark anyways.
Yep. So
Okay.
the second option that we wanted to look at was, we don't mess with the elevator. And
Yeah.
we tried to use as much of the existing space as possible, without putting the public on the second floor. So in this one, it was the first floor. Again, just with the number of people being put on the first floor, we really have to utilize square footage for restrooms. So you can see we still have about 5 restrooms. We're essentially saying, three, potentially 2, potentially 3 multi-purpose spaces. Essentially, it can be whatever we want. We can have one large multi-purpose space that maybe has a divider down here towards the bottom. We could potentially do the other option where we go vertical with the multi-purpose room and split it. But the idea here is that, this is essentially the area in green that would be available for activity space. We'd still want some entry area for, I would imagine, somebody to be able to check people in at some point. We would need some restrooms right off the entry. We need some, gathering space for people coming and going. But the idea here is you got maybe 3 potential multi-purpose spaces, call them whatever we want. With the upstairs being all staff, we would leave upstairs as is. Essentially, we wouldn't touch any of the walls. We wouldn't allow any of the public up there. This is a rough layout of what's existing. We would just, live with where the bathrooms are, where the storage is, the open office area. We could put tables and chairs out if we want, but it seems like there'd be plenty of staff space up there as is without really needing to add anything additional. But like I said, if we were to add a conference room or anything like that, it gets a little bit tricky, because as soon as you do that, the state access board could potentially look at that as, well, if you're going to have a conference room up there and people need to meet with staff, then maybe they're going to be going upstairs. So we just want to be sensitive about what are we putting upstairs, because that could could play into a role of what the access board does or doesn't decide to do with a elevator variance. Because like I said, in this option, we'd be looking at doing nothing to the elevators.
Chris, when you kind of get into this a little later for more solid kind of figures and stuff, will you have like, hey, an elevator is a rough magnitude of this price if we put it on the side. So we could kind of pick and choose and how we wanted to mix things up. So we know, okay, you know,
Yep.
sprinklers are roughly this much, elevators roughly this much, kitchens
Exactly.
roughly this much. Okay, great. So that we could
Exactly.
tap later and
We-
maybe version of these two plans together to.
Chris, in this
Yeah.
scenario,
Sure.
then the center would not be able to utilize volunteers to move food from the commercial kitchen to service area on the first floor. Is that correct?
Volunteers technically would fall under the staff category.
It would,
So
okay.
you could get away with having folks bring stuff from downstairs upstairs. The elevator, like we said, is not accessible. It's functional. You could use it kind of as a dumbwaiter, bringing stuff up and down the floors. So technically, volunteers, we could say, are staff, and we wouldn't fall under that accessibility category. And then it's the same conversation here. Like, what could we potentially put in the basement? Could we put more bathrooms down there and try to squeeze in an activity space along that exterior wall? Yeah, we definitely could, but it's just adding more cost the more bathrooms we use. Does the kitchen want to flip against the exterior wall? We could certainly look at doing that. The food pantry, as we mentioned, makes sense to fit in there along the exterior wall for access. So, could we look at skinning that a little bit differently? Yep, definitely. But there's definitely some restrictions there, like I said, regarding the, how many bodies we can actually have down there. But from an accessibility standpoint, to Joyce's point earlier, it's at grade, so it could be considered an accessible floor, and we wouldn't really need to mess with any elevator component. But from a optic standpoint, having somebody in an activity upstairs and then having to send them to go outside to get to the basement, it's not the best.
It's not optimum, but we're not talking about having the best. We're talking about having the best we can in this space.
Totally get it.
And I think asking for a variance isn't out of the question.
You say is not?
It's
It's
not
not
up.
out of the question. We can apply for a variance.
Absolutely. Yep, that was why we were looking at, everything on one floor, like we had talked about on site there. What would that even look like? And again, same thing as the first option, Jen, you and I got to look at this and get into it in more detail. But this was just, roughly this is how much space we think we can fit, in this area here.
Yeah.
I think, could you go to the second floor on this one again? I think, I think when you look at the other one, where you talk about putting the elevator on the exterior, is a moot point. I mean, you can fit 4 people standing, 1 person sitting and whatnot. And if you look at the 521 CMR, if you ask for a variance on that, we're not negating people going up and down. At the previous senior center that we were at for 20+ years, there was no elevator. It was just people's ability to go up and down stairs. And people, though the stairwells that are currently existing are large enough for people to walk up and down. And the Whately Town Hall that we currently use just has a lift. So asking for a variance is not out of the question, in my opinion, and I think would be better.
But Jennifer, I think what Chris is saying is that even with a variance, you will not be allowed to have the public on the second floor. That's what you're gonna have to tell. I think that's what Chris is saying, is that you would be telling the access board that you're limiting the second floor to staff. Unless you ask for a variance for the public, which is gonna be trickier to get, is what I'm hearing him say.
That's our experience. Yes, if we're saying we're going to allow the public up there, but we're not going to provide an elevator, could we get a variance? Yeah, it's hard to say. If we said no public up there, it definitely increases the chances significantly. But again, it's a crapshoot.
But it's a waste of space to go into a building where you can't fully utilize the entire space. And the ground floor and the first floor, leaving it the way it is would be fine. But I mean, if you're looking at putting the if you go back to your other presentation that you had for the second floor, you've got movement classes. And I don't say this to be disrespectful, but the majority of our folks who are participating in our enhanced fitness class are fully able-bodied with minor modifications. So we're not putting people upstairs on that second or the top floor who don't have the ability to go up and down stairs or use a smaller wheelchair. And I know that is not what the code is, and I'm well aware of the ADA profile, but you know, with limitations, you're still limiting the population that's going upstairs and having the main multi-purpose room be where the majority of the activity would be. You know, where small classes would be on the top floor. And it could be flipped either way. So.
What did you have for a magnitude on the phase two, option two, Chris? And maybe you haven't done one yet either, just like.
This one with the kitchen and the sprinklers and, renovating the first floor with some mechanical spaces and adding of the bathrooms is definitely significantly less. It's still
Yeah.
gonna most likely be in the $2-3 million range.
Okay.
So, it's half. It's a good, it's a good amount less, but I know everybody wants to hear smaller numbers, and so do I on all these projects, but just the way construction is these days, it's hard to do anything for small numbers these days. So even a $3 million project is a pretty small project when we're talking prevailing wages in Massachusetts, chapter 149. It gets into it starts to add up quickly. So I know nobody wants to hear these numbers, but those are what we're seeing.
Just want realistic numbers so we can set realistic expectations is all. Yeah, want to be fair. And hopefully bids, our 1888 project came in under bid, so that was nice. We prepped for the higher number, and hopefully when we're done, we'll be at a lower number, so.
Yep.
Okay.
So Chris, just to reiterate on scheme 2, the $2 to
Yep.
$3 million scheme, one could put in the variance trying to make a case for the use of the second floor, but that could be rejected. And then if you wanted to proceed, you would be really limiting the second floor to office space.
Correct.
Do you put in a variance, like, would you request a variance before we went out and started this project, or, because we kind of need to know that what our, before we kind of ask the town for a certain number, some $1 million somewhere, we got to know what is available, what is not. Like, how do we, at what time frame do you do a request for variance?
Typically it's on a project early on, but in
Yeah.
my experience, and this is just the projects that I've done variances on, the building was already owned by the client. So this one's a little bit different, where you guys have to make a decision of, do we buy this building or not? And all I can do is give you guys, our experience with the variance process, where, if you do limit where the public's going, you have a pretty good chance. But once you start to say, hey, we're going to put the public on the second floor and we're not going to give them an accessible elevator, things get a little bit squirrelier, and I can't say one way or the other if they'd accept it. But yes, to your question, we would want to do it very early on in the process to make sure that, nobody's doing or going down a path that ultimately we can't go down.
Well, we're not looking to purchase the building, we're looking to potentially lease the building. And I'm wondering, the board of oversight members who are on, if that could be, asked to, Delta Sand and Gravel, if they would be able to request the variance or look into that prior to us moving forward.
Yeah, I guess I sort of feel like we need to know a little bit more about the mechanics of the variance. And then I know that the thing that's the overwhelming thing, and I'm writing it in my notes, is that, right now we're in 1,800 square feet with
Yep.
one non-accessible bathroom.
Uh,
And somehow that's okay. That change of use to use that space was somehow okay. But if we go to this building, which would give us much more space, many more bathrooms than we already have, it'd be such an improvement to go in there without even changing a single nail on a single wall. But somehow we can't do it because somehow we've triggered the need to have an accessible elevator or a variance, and somehow we now need to put in a million more bathrooms. Then, like, just the bathrooms that are there are just so much better than what we already have. Like it, so I guess I understand the elevator might be something where there's a law and there's an accessibility police who might come knock on our door one day and say, you're breaking the law. But is there a bathroom police who's going to come around and say, hey, you don't have enough bathrooms? Or, I mean, and the sprinklers, that's going to be the fire marshal, of course. And so,
Yeah.
He comes around.
I mean, does I guess you're sensing my frustration, but
Yep.
what of what you're presenting here is would be nice, and how much of this is you absolutely have to have this, or someone is going to shut you down?
So the bathroom question, that's a plumbing code issue. That's a building code issue. So the building code will most likely, or the building official will most likely not give you a permit to build anything in here unless you have the state required amount of toilets per how many people are going to be in this building. It's the same thing as the sprinklers. It's all law, it's
And
all
oh,
code.
how many
So that's
people did you assume would be in the building for this?
you take square footages, you divide them by what the code tells you. So if it's an assembly space, you can use 15, 15 square foot per person. If it's tables and chairs, if it's just chairs, you use 7. There's a bunch of calculations that you used, and I used all the, standard calculations to figure out based on these layouts, how many bodies are going to be in the space per code. It's a
Yeah,
pretty straightforward calculation.
so
It
it has
spits out.
nothing to do with the number of members.
Correct.
No, yeah, correct. It's the size of the spaces and the use of the spaces. That's
Okay.
that's
Well,
what they
Chris,
base it
aren't
on.
you gonna have to sign off and say that the building meets code?
Yeah, any architect or any engineer is going to have to stamp this thing and say this is compliant. So I get it. We get these frustrations all the time with, well, what we have now is much worse. Why can't we just, move that over here and it'd be a lot better? I get it. It's just we have to comply with the codes and the laws, and anybody who has a license needs to comply with those requirements, and we're kind of handcuffed to that.
We're
So
not
That's
really
whether
compliance
we-
now, because our space is really just office space, is really kind of what we've rented that as,
No.
administration office.
It's, originally we came into here with that concept, but we've been doing this, we've been having the majority of our program here. We're only doing movement
I
classes.
get that, but that's
elsewhere.
not what we were doing. That's not how we leased it, right? So the more we yell, more we say about it, right? More somebody can come knocking on the door and going, no, they could shut us down,
Okay, Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, do the same exact rules apply whether we lease or we buy?
yes.
Okay. Wow, all right.
Yeah, so it has to do with the certificate. Sorry, I can't say the word. Certificate of occupancy, and to get a certificate of occupancy, it's going to go from a business use to a mixed use. So it's going to have an assembly component to it because you're putting, more bodies into a smaller space. And once you change the use to get that certificate of occupancy, you're going to have somebody stamp and sign the drawings and say, this is code compliant. And that's when all the codes and whatnot get triggered. So the change of use is the big thing. If this was already being used as a senior center and you guys were just moving in and, freshening some things up, that's a different story. But because it was built as an office building and you guys are going to move in as a community center, essentially, that's when things get much more strict from a code standpoint.
Yeah. Can you tell me what's your ballpark number for the sprinklers?
We just did one. Let me get that. We just did one in Amherst where we sprinklered a building about the same size as this. And if you give me a moment, I can pull that up. The only difference here is they had the fire service already pulled into the building. So that changes the calculation a little bit, but
meaning the pipe coming from the road.
from the
Already.
road. So we didn't have to tap into the street. So we have to add a little bit in there for that, which is a decent amount of work, bringing in a, a 6-inch or 4-inch fire service from the main to the building. But we had 1A. So just for the piping inside the building, it was about $300,000. That was as of last year. So we added another,
Okay.
we added another 100 and change on for the tapping into the road and doing all the road work and getting the service to the building. So we were looking at a rough order of magnitude of about 500 to sprinkler the building.
Okay, and that triggers code right there. Right,
Yes.
because the building's worth 1.2 million, and it does seem, I mean, I'm really getting despondent over here about these numbers. Because putting $2 or $3 million into a building that's only worth a million two, I guess it's making that building worth a lot more. Uh, but uh, I just I just don't know how to do this.
Feel
You know,
like you,
I don't know how to find us a new senior center home. Like if this can't work because we have to spend 2 to 3 times the value of the building to bring it up to code for public use, then I just want to resign and go home and bury, well, I'm already at home, but
to my last,
just get my pillow and start crying.
Yeah, but
welcome to my
Joyce,
last 10 years.
one of the things though, we're gonna face the same expenditures for getting a, for
Yeah.
fire or fire suppression system into Deerfield Town Hall. They don't have one there, right,
Correct.
Trevor?
I don't believe there is.
And
That's
you only
right.
have 3
You're right.
bathrooms to use in that building.
Yeah.
And there's
So I
no
think-
commercial kitchen, so we're looking at it there too.
Yeah, my thoughts thinking about this is like, when you say the value of the building, I almost feel like if you were gonna do this kind of project, we'd probably wanna buy the building. Like, I mean, I don't wanna invest that kind of money in a building that somebody else owns. I would think that we'd wanna own the building and then do the work, and that way it's ours. So, because I don't wanna do that kind of money and I'll never get it passed to do that kind of work in a building we don't own, and then the lease payment would, we need to do a 50-year lease just to get, to make it affordable.
Yeah. And to me, the lease was the most attractive part of this.
Right,
Right?
and
That
we could do a lease to own, that kind of thing too, but it still needs to be like lease to own the building plus the capital outlay, which we could do we could debt exclude that. But yeah, I mean, and
Lauren, I think your
Jennifer's right,
camera's
whatever
in your
we,
ear.
Yeah, Lauren,
What's-
can you turn your camera off, please?
whatever we had
Thanks.
to do there or do here, like you said, either place, we gotta do all that work, so. Yeah, so we'll be curious to see what 8 Conway Street magnitude looks like as well. I don't, probably not much different. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
And 8
just
Conway Street is many years away as well. So
Right.
I
Right.
guess, I guess I'm disappointed in all the constraints. I can understand why we have a housing crisis because everything's got to be built to, so I mean, it has to be at this level when people are living on the street, something at a lower
Mhm.
level would actually be okay. You know, I guess that's the frustration, and I know nobody here can change the code, but finding a way to be able to have a better place, like we could go sign a lease, I suppose, if we all pitched in the money, and I don't know that like do people come around to buildings and check? Yeah, I guess they would because it'd be a public building.
Yeah.
I don't even know
Oh,
how to express my frustration at the what we're expected to do with you know that we really have to you know buy with money we don't have and pay for with money we don't have to have something that's up here when I think everybody'd be happy with something here. You know, I'd be happy with the number of bathrooms they have because I know that's gonna work for us. I'd be happy with, I'd be happy with so many, most of our seniors can walk up the stairs. The number that we have who actually need to use the elevator is really small. But the state's not planning for us. They're planning for the building to be packed at all times to the maximum. And so you have to build to that. And I'm really frustrated with this. And if anybody knows a way around that, I want to know.
Well, one of the things, Joyce, number one, we're not buying the building now. That's not gonna happen. We can't get three towns to agree on anything.
That's right.
And buying a building isn't gonna happen. Two, I think if we were to go to, Mr. Warner and, let them know the high numbers. They talked about having a 10-year lease. Maybe we do a 20-year lease. I don't know. I
Yeah.
know that the costs are going to double and triple and, every other year that we wait to build anything is going to increase. So, but one of the things that was suggested before is talking to, letting them know the information, Delta Standard Gravel, the information as to what the overarching view is. I think if you go in and you say $400,000 for sprinkler system is one thing. An elevator, you get the variance on. I think we'd have a really good shot with the variance. So I don't know.
And
I think those two options we have a better chance at than, $6 million project. And it's gonna, like you said, Joyce, before, it's gonna be years, at least a few years before Deerfield is out of the town hall.
yeah. And even there, I mean, one of the nice things about this building is these folks have really kept it up. I'm really
Yes.
afraid that if we buy a building, it is just we're not gonna keep it up. We're not known for in our municipal spaces, upkeep on the building. Um, and I think if we, kind of just walking into that building and I've walked into both that building and 8 Conway, and you can tell the difference.
And 8 Conway, unfortunately, I mean, one of the things we found out when we did the feasibility study before, even if you put in a 2-story building brand new, parking is a major issue there. That's something we cannot get around.
So,
Could we lease one floor?
right, that thought occurred to me. What if we were to just lease the bottom floor, the
Well,
two
the first
accessible
floor,
floors,
it makes the most sense.
and then
Yeah.
At least
uh,
and the one we got.
and then use, yeah, staff offices could be in the downstairs. But in what they can check them all in the mechanical room.
Wouldn't you still need to upgrade everything still? I mean, the issue is kind of the change of use, I think, on that one.
Well, we'd only need sprinklers on the floors we use, right? I mean, would they, I don't know, maybe that's something to explore with Craig. Um, would they lease us just the 2 bottom floors? And if you're just doing the 2 bottom floors, what kind of savings would that be? Um,
And
We could put a covered walkway going from one floor to the next outside.
I was thinking that.
Better than the tents, isn't it?
Can they sell us the lot and we'll just build next door?
So you gotta go all the way up and around, that was the only thing.
Yeah. Well, no, because remember there's another door on the far side, so you could actually cut a nice little path through there too.
Yep, yep.
yeah.
Well, thank you, Christopher, for.
Well, maybe next time we see Craig, we'll ask him if we can just buy the lot next door and and build new there. Because I
Well,
mean,
I mean, it
$6 million,
helps to have
that's a new building. I mean, right? That's a brand new building on an empty field.
is,
But who's
Hey.
gonna own it?
Well, maybe we have to change our structure so that we can own it.
Yeah,
But I'm just,
yeah. Well, thank you, Chris. I really appreciate kind of at least having a concept of 4 to 6 million roughly.
for the big
Yeah.
one and 2 to 3 million for the smaller.
Yeah. And,
Funny how they both end up having about the same number of square feet of
yeah,
habitable space. That doesn't seem
Yeah.
like much.
and we can work on that, obviously, where things go and how big and all that kind of stuff, but I think this helps at least kind of start us in the right direction and then to have some kind of discussions on, okay, we're not doing a $12 million building, we're gonna do half of that. So we need, look, we're either not gonna have a senior center in the 3 towns, or we're going to, and this is what it's gonna cost, and people can say, why can't you just go in the church, or why can't? Because this is why, it's change of use and building codes. And here in Deerfield, in a couple of weeks, we're gonna talk about adding more regulation and more cost to building. So just, everybody get that in your head. So, not that I have anybody from Deerfield here on the meeting, so anyways, well, at least
I
we
live in
understand.
Deerfield, thank you.
Yes, thank you, thank you.
Nick Pistoia.
Thank you.
Larry.
I'll make it more expensive.
So
So, yeah.
for me, I mean, do you guys want me just to kind of pause anything that I was working on, or do you guys need to deliberate more? Or I can basically stop what I'm doing if you guys don't want me to do any more evaluations.
I think it's important to continue doing what
Yeah.
you're doing, and
Okay.
we need to know kind of elevator cost this much, bringing the sprinkler in this much. These are the items that are really triggering us to spend this amount of money, and this is kind of what we think, and it's $6 million for all this stuff, or 4, or whatever it is. I think it helps to have that stuff printed out in a data sheet with your logo on it, and it helps us to say, look, we've spent this money, and we want to know what this costs. I mean, it hurts to hear the number, but it needs to be honestly said and presented. We're still gonna continue with our, nights of kind of getting this information out there and days of having these meetings. So any help you can give us in
Yeah.
knowledge about what these things are, and that we gather more questions from the public and send them back. And I think it's important to do the process because, like I said, either we're gonna have a senior center in 3 towns or we're not. And it costs money, just everything in this world costs money. And every time we do a project, everyone says, well, what about the seniors? How come the seniors? So this is what it costs, and everybody wants to step up and do something. So it's
Right.
up to the seniors to pay for it and us to pay for it and everybody to kind of get on board. Or we decide, look, we're not gonna bother. But I don't think that's the answer. I think our seniors are too important, our community is too important. Yeah,
Yeah.
needs to happen.
And then, so generally, I think we should all develop the same correct and effective answer to the question, why can't we just put it fill in
Yeah,
the blank? Like another person emails me, oh, that Volvo place up on Divine, we ought to just put it there. And
our repair shop, so.
like, yeah, and
Yeah.
I understand the question. I completely do. That Volvo place might be better than what we have right now. I doubt it, actually, honestly, because
Right,
the building's in such bad shape. But we need a really good and effective answer. And I think I'm starting to get like the word certificate of occupancy is part of that answer. Okay.
that's right,
And we
Joyce.
could not get a certificate of occupancy for a public use. And then people will not understand that because it's like, yeah, well, where you are right now doesn't meet the code. Well, somehow the accessibility police have not been to see us yet.
That's right,
And I hope they're
that's
not
right,
watching this the Zoom
correct,
meeting to
correct.
um, to so they come over and shut us down. So, but what I'm hearing is if we had to do any work on that place, they could come in and say, oh, well, your change of use and you don't have enough bathrooms, and you're shut down. So you can be shut down by not having a certificate of occupancy. And the only reason we didn't need a certificate of occupancy for where we are now is because we
It
didn't
was and a little bit of
we
gathering.
didn't know, they
Right,
could still shut us down.
sure,
Chris Monty, could you just give me for code purposes what the how many bathrooms you have to have per square feet of people.
Yes, I could send that. I could send that excerpt to you.
Okay,
Great.
That's no
That would be
problem.
really helpful, because then if we look at renting 1 floor, 2 floors.
Yep.
All of those different pieces, we can have that data to help us make those decisions.
Absolutely.
Very valuable work. Thank you. And
Yeah.
I appreciate
Right.
you doing it quickly too. I mean, I know it's just 30,000 feet, but you put a lot together in this short amount of time,
Yes.
and I'm grateful for that.
yeah.
Appreciate it.
Sorry,
And I hope
sorry it
not
wasn't
too
better
ranty.
news.
No, yeah. You gotta work on that, Chris. You gotta come out with fake numbers.
Yeah, and sorry for being so ranty today. So
Yeah.
I
This
get-
is
I get-
tame
you
compared
guys-
to before.
You guys are passionate about helping the seniors, and I am too. And unfortunately, I typically am the bearer of bad news when people ask me how much do things cost, and I hate being in that position. So
Yeah.
I will do whatever I can to help the team and to get you guys into a better facility, and
Yeah.
I'll keep on keeping on. And I will be in touch though to talk next steps, what you guys,
Yeah.
for timing, next meeting.
Okay.
How can we pull the information together quickly? How we want to digest it? Jen, if you want me to tweak anything on the diagrams just for public
Yeah.
presentation purposes, so you can talk better about things, totally
I
open
think
to it.
so.
Just let me know.
I think so, because our first presentation for community forum is gonna be October 10th at 1 o'clock at the Whately Town Hall. So if we could have something, if we could chat, whether it's tomorrow, early next week. To get that solidified, also, I believe we can, let people know, hey, $6 million project is a lot less expensive than $16.9 million
Right.
project, and where are we at, what are people looking to do? And don't get me wrong, I totally understand that the majority of the economy is stagnant right now because of what's going on with budget cuts federally in other areas. Grants, aren't foreseeable anytime soon. I don't know if the community development block grant is gonna be available in the spring. I know that some of the state grants, like for MassDOT is open, so, but I know that they have like a $4 or $5 million cut to what they were being able to offer. So I assume that would be going everywhere if anything else is offered. But people keep asking me, where are we going? What are we doing? And I think having these informational sessions are going to be key to educating people that they can make the best decisions to fit their home or their households, their budgets, and to understand the process. And that's the goal. We're not just focusing on this project, which is key, but we're also focusing on our age and dementia friendly work. And to share why the senior center is a really great resource and why we need the support in the community. So
Perfect.
all right.
yeah.
All right.
And
Is there
any
time
thoughts
for
on
is there time for one more question or?
Is there gonna be public comment?
Yeah, but I have one. Yes, that's after we're done grilling Chris.
Just wondering because we're running late. Thank you.
Right.
We're not late.
I had one last question to give Chris.
I'm full.
I didn't think of it at the time, but for say the sprinklers, and this gets back to the rent versus own. If we own a place, we have to pay prevailing wage, and I assume that the numbers you gave were for publicly owned, so that is at prevailing wage. And so it seems if the owner of the building puts that in, they do not have to do prevailing wage, and they may be able to do it for a lower amount. So that's something where we can take the numbers to Craig and say, are you willing to sprinkler your building for a 10-year lease?
You are 100% correct that once the private world gets involved in developing, the prevailing wage disappears and they can do whatever they want. The public bid laws are onerous and expensive, and if we can find another way to build, it's outside of the public realm, it definitely is less expensive.
Yeah.
So
And if
you're
if
right.
we were to ask about, I'm trying to thread this needle here. And because I mean, he's got lots of people who work on the buildings already. And maybe they already know how to I mean, I won't know till I talk to him. But prevailing wage is built into those numbers.
And I
Was the
think,
so
Becky
I
had her
think
hand up, Joyce.
just to
yeah,
add,
Becky, you want to go?
I just wanted to say real quick on top of that, yes, I think, and I think the owner is open to like that avenue, Joyce, of like, if we gave the list of, okay, this is what we need, and then they could kind of do their own pencil
Yeah,
pushing.
because their price tag it might be less than a third of the cost of the building to sprinkler it. And I guess the other thing it's like staging, like, can we have some time to get this stuff done? But I see Becky had her hand up. Go ahead, Becky.
Thank you. Joyce, I had made that point that you just made about prevailing wage. When was at a meeting with the other town administrators, Peter Kane and Chris Dunn and Veronique. The response was maybe, maybe not. And it's based on the Brazy case that happened a number in 2010, but recently in our MCPPO updates and education materials, they're talking about that there are some cases when if building particularly to suit the needs of the municipality, even if it's a third party doing it, it's questionable. It's not 100% that we
Okay.
wouldn't have to pay prevailing wage. And I think I'm sorry, Chris Dunn isn't here. He has a better handle on the issue.
Okay, thank you.
Just to depress you a little bit more, Joyce.
Yeah, because
Could you send could
my
you send
mental health.
that case name to me, Becky, via email?
Yes.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I'll forward it
Thank
to you. Chris forwarded it to me.
All right. Well, let me go. Dan, do you have anything else you want to add? And anything else you want to ask of Chris?
I mean, yeah, I guess the elevator, how much was the elevator itself roughly? Was that a 2 or 3 million, two something million? How much was that?
The
Like
elevator itself, we were looking
Yeah.
at, with the elevator plus the addition, anywhere from $500,000 to $750,000.
Oh, okay, I thought that was more, okay, that's something crazy number.
But again, that's just my,
But yeah,
rough,
okay.
super high level guess, and we'll have a sense of that,
Okay.
once we get a little bit more time to develop that.
You're right. Okay. So and that's the part the work that's not yet really been done. That's
Correct.
something where you're going to get a little more clarity. Because I was thinking to get to 6 million, the elevator must have been 3 million if the sprinklers were less than 500,000. And that is work to come. So
Well,
We'll
that
break
was
that down
also
for
to
you.
add bathrooms, the kitchen costs,
Right.
and the mechanical movement.
okay.
Yeah, maybe we can
And,
get less. Maybe we can get to less. I hope. So
Okay.
let me get it all together, and that should be for me, that should be, a 2.5 weeks, 2.5 weeks to pull together, good numbers from my third party estimators to, verify things and make sure that you guys have enough data to be able to dive into, and answer all these
Yeah.
questions.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we'll get working on it.
So is the nature of the public comment things that we might want Chris to be able to help us address?
Yes.
Okay. Well, then maybe we can go into public comment then. There are some people here by Zoom. You'll raise your hands if if you want to do public comment, but I'm going to go to the people in the room with Jen first, whom I can't see very well. I'm going to make your picture bigger.
Yeah.
Maybe Jen, you can facilitate
When they
the
start
public
talking,
comment
the
there.
camera will move.
Sorry?
When they start talking, the camera should move.
Okay. So you call on them though. I need someone in the room to
Nikki
kind of
Stoya was
say,
the first person.
Thank you, Jen.
You're welcome.
First of all, Mike, I wanted you to stay because I wanted to thank you for the presentation. And of the 2 points that I want to make, one of them is, it would be really, I think, easier to gather public support for a building if we could see it. we haven't had a chance to view the space yet as we have other places. So this is not the first meeting I've been to. This is great to look at the diagrams, but I could really get into it more if I could actually see the building. Number two, I want to circle back to Jen's comment at the very beginning, because I think it's the most important. Joyce, I know you were feeling frustrated, everybody else. Imagine how we feel, right? Like we
Oh, yeah.
really partake of all the activities that Jen makes for us and her staff and everyone. And we just really feel like by the time we might get anything, we're going to have dropped dead. I mean, I don't mind being quoted by that. And we are the people that we take care of each other in class. Jen is absolutely right. Most of us can get up and down the stairs without any problem. So while we're being inclusive, we don't want to be inadvertently discriminatory to the people who can get up and down the stairs and use the space. So it's very frustrating. And I've been as my husband, I've been in Hamden of either Sunderland or Deerfield for almost 30 years. And happily, you know this, I'm not telling you anything, happily approved all the wonderful things we've done for the schools and whatever, having never had a child in the school system, but I know that's important because they need to be taken care of and the seniors need to. So I think somewhere we need a rallying cry that said, seniors can't wait anymore. Like we're doing well now and we're paying taxes here, but we're going to be dead by the time this happens. So that's all I have to say. But the more important thing is we need to see the space so we can help you advertise the building. And maybe successfully ask for variance. Thank you.
Larry?
Just, I'm not sure if I caught it or not. Is there any chance the landlord will participate in some of these upgrades since he's gonna inherit the building when it's all done?
That's one of the things that we were talking about during the meeting is to, Mr. Warner, Craig Warner is part of Delta Sand and Gravel, and he has shared in the past that they might be able to, you know, take on some of the expense. We have not, up until today, really had a ballpark approximate cost to know what to share with them.
Yeah.
And that's why we were discussing the prevailing wage, whether or not that would be required and where you could potentially get the variance, because, you know, in their presentation, they had a exterior elevator which could potentially occur to make things a little bit easier. But also, you know, the variance could make things a lot less complicated. But yes, in long short, or short.
It just seems to me like the landlord who's going to inherit this when we're done. Might be willing to participate. I would think to some significant degree.
Yeah,
You know?
one of the things shared at one of the other public meetings is that if we looked at we're looking at a potential 10-year lease where I think it was shared, we have the option to buy at the end of that. Or not buy it, because as I shared during the other part of the meeting, we can't get to an agreement on certain things. How are we gonna get to an agreement on purchasing a building at this point? So good questions. Mary Ann?
You talked about just renting the first floor or bottom floor. How much square footage is that?
So I believe with that particular demo, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris Wanty, it was around 5,796 square feet on your chart for the base, for the ground floor and then the first floor, or was that also incorporating the offices on the top?
That was incorporating both. So I believe the floor, roughly the floor plate, each floor plate is a little under 4,000 square feet, but that's like including the walls and stairs and whatnot. So each floor is about 1,000 square feet, you know, ballpark.
Yeah. So each floor is about 4 times as big as the space you're in there. A little bit more than 4 times.
Well, 2 times, because this is 1,800 square feet,
Oh, I'm
so
sorry.
4,000, yeah.
You're absolutely right. I was counting 2
It's
floors.
late
I
in
was
the
counting
day.
the basement floor and the first floor together. Yeah, sorry. I spoke that incorrectly. Sorry.
It's okay.
Would be feasible to just go there. You'd have a much larger space to work with. Not ideal, but it's a beginning of getting in and expanding.
Well, Marianne, we're not allowed to do that. Building code and what's the other word? Certificate of
Certificate of
occupation.
occupancy.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the public?
Okay,
Anyone online?
yeah, online
I
there were a
don't see
couple of
any raised
people.
hands here.
Okay. All right, I guess I'll end by thanking the folks from EDM Studio for coming and putting up with our ranting and raving and helping us understand things better. And looking forward to getting to the more details that are going to happen over the next week or two. Um,
Thanks for having me.
all right. I guess I would entertain a motion from one of the board members.
You adjourn?
Second,
All right, all those in favor, since we are remote, we've got to do this by roll call. So Trevor,
I'm Trevor McDaniel.
Dan,
Dan Murphy, aye.
Joyce Palmer Fortune, aye. So our
Thank
meeting
you.
is adjourned. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, everybody, and thank you for the folks who showed up and asked questions and the people who showed up just to listen. I just having you having the public in the public meetings is really, really important. And I wrote down notes on your comments on my little piece of paper here with everything else. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Thanks.